There's a kind of silence that falls right after someone says, "You're too young to be in love. Just focus on your studies." It's not an angry silence. It's the silence of someone who has no words left to explain how they feel. You're 17. You like someone. Your heart beats a little faster when you see their name pop up. You write their initials in the corner of your notebook, but you also turn in your homework. You show up for exams. You have dreams, big ones. So why does it feel like caring about someone means you're not serious about your life? Maybe it's not about the love. Maybe it's about how love has been misunderstood. Older generations often speak from experience. Their fears are real, but so is the confusion of a young person who's told their feelings are invalid just because of their age. Let's start from that place, the well-meaning caution of our parents, and why to them, love can sometimes feel like a threat to your future. When a parent says, "Don't fall in love too early," they're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to protect you from something they couldn't escape. For many in the older generation, love wasn't a fairy tale. It was a distraction that came too soon, before they knew who they were, before they had the tools to handle rejection, betrayal, or heartbreak. Love, in their memory, was entangled with struggle, emotional, financial, sometimes even physical. And so, the message passed down wasn't "love wisely," but "avoid love for now." This belief didn't come from nowhere. In their time, life was rigid. School wasn't optional. It was survival. The path was linear. Study hard, get a job, secure a stable income, then consider relationships. Any deviation from that order was dangerous, especially for women. Falling in love too soon could mean dropping out of school, being judged by relatives, losing independence. For men, it meant financial pressure without preparation. In that context, "don't love early" wasn't repression, it was a survival strategy. And even today, many parents see early relationships as potential threats. They worry that heartbreak will derail you, that you'll lose focus, that you'll anchor your self-worth to someone who's also still figuring out who they are. Their worry is sincere. They've seen too many students cry their way through final exams, too many friends abandon goals to follow love that wasn't ready, too many dreams postponed for someone and never picked up again. So when they say, "just focus on school," it's not because they don't believe in love. It's because they've seen what can happen when it arrives uninvited, unguarded. But there's another side to this story, one they often forget. In trying to prevent us from falling, they sometimes also prevent us from learning how to stand up after we do. Because while love can break us, it can also teach us things no textbook ever will. How to listen, how to forgive, how to grow through discomfort. Still, to many adults, those lessons aren't worth the risk. Not yet. And here's where the real disconnect begins. Because for them, protection means delaying love. But for young people today, delaying love sometimes feels like denying a part of themselves. Especially in a world where emotional intelligence is becoming just as important as academic performance, young people don't just want to pass exams, they want to understand their hearts. And when that desire is dismissed as immature, it creates a silent kind of rebellion. Not loud, not explosive, but deeply personal. It's no longer about disobeying, it's about being seen. The gap between generations isn't about love itself. It's about the timing, the trust, and the belief that young people can hold both ambition and affection at once. But if we pause here, something interesting emerges. Maybe the real issue isn't whether young people should love or not, but how they're taught to handle love when it shows up That brings us to the heart of the conversation. How do young people today actually feel when they hear, "Don't love too early"? Let's sit with that feeling before we rush to explain it away. Most of us don't fall in love to prove a point. We fall because someone makes us laugh in the middle of a stressful week. Because a glance in the hallway suddenly makes school feel less suffocating. Because in a world full of expectations, someone finally sees us not just as a student, a grade, or a resume view as a person. So when we're told not to love, especially when we haven't even done anything wrong, it doesn't feel like protection. It feels like rejection. Rejection of our feelings, our capacity to care, our right to explore who we are in connection with someone else. No one likes being talked to like they're irresponsible just for having a crush, or being made to feel like their heart is a distraction. Many of us don't rebel outwardly. We don't scream back. But inside, something quietly fractures. Some of us stop sharing anything with our parents. Some of us keep loving, but in secret. Some of us internalize the message that to be loved means we must first deserve it, that we're not worthy until we achieve enough, accomplish enough, become enough. That kind of thinking follows you. It teaches you to earn affection with performance, to bury desire beneath duty, to prioritize perfection over connection. And years later, even when the rules are lifted, the fear remains. Will I be enough now? Others go the opposite way. They try to prove the warning wrong, to show they can love early and still succeed. But sometimes, in that rush, we jump into relationships we're not ready for. We confuse attention with affection, comfort with compatibility, and when things fall apart, we're left feeling foolish, like we validated every adult fear. But here's the thing. The pain doesn't come from loving early. It comes from not knowing how to love well. And we don't learn that by avoiding love altogether. We learn it by understanding what it teaches us. We learn that love isn't ownership, but partnership. We learn that healthy love doesn't demand we abandon our goals, but supports them. We learn how to set boundaries, communicate clearly, and hold space for another person without shrinking ourselves. Some of us learn these lessons the hard way. Others, quietly, carry them through high school and beyond, choosing carefully, loving gently, and growing into themselves with each experience seen not in spite of love, but because of it. And yet, the guilt lingers. Every time we feel joy in a relationship, a part of us wonders, am I disappointing someone? Am I wasting time? It's the burden of carrying someone else's fear in your heart, even when you're trying to be honest about your own. What we wish, often, is not permission to do whatever we want. What we wish is guidance, conversation, curiosity, a willingness to ask us, not accuse us. Because we're not looking to be told what love is. We're looking for someone to help us figure out what it means to us. And maybe that's where the healing begins. Not in choosing one side over the other, but in learning to sit between them, to respect the caution and still honor the feeling, to hold the tension and still move forward with care. That space in between is what growing up is made of. And it leads us to a deeper kind of clarity. Not should I love or not, but what kind of love helps me become the person I want to be? That's the question we start asking, not as teenagers fighting for freedom, but as people learning to be responsible for their own hearts. So let's go there next. Let's talk about what it really means to grow up between two worlds, between obedience and curiosity, between tradition and experience, and how, maybe, there's a third voice waiting to be heard. Not the voice of a parent, not the voice of a teenager, but the voice of someone who's lived both and found something softer, truer, in between. There comes a point where you stop needing to be right and start wanting to be real. You no longer care about proving to your parents that loving someone didn't ruin you. You're not trying to justify why you dated that one person at 16. You're not even angry anymore, because now you understand. You see how love at any age can be both a gift and a gamble, and that protecting someone from love doesn't necessarily protect them from pain. As someone who's loved early, failed at it, grown through it, and found peace on the other side, you begin to see the nuance. You stop asking, "Was I wrong to love?" and start asking, "What did I learn from it?" Here's what I've learned. Love doesn't wait for you to be ready. It arrives in moments that are inconvenient, unexpected, sometimes even unwise. And while you can't always control when it comes, you can decide how you meet it. You can meet it with awareness instead of impulse. You can meet it with boundaries instead of fear. You can meet it with openness, not to lose yourself, but to find who you are in connection to someone else. That's what no one tells you when you're young. That love isn't just a feeling, it's a mirror. It reflects all the parts of you that are still growing. And sometimes it exposes things you didn't know you had to work on. That can be overwhelming. But it's also where real growth begins. From a mature place, you no longer blame your parents for being overprotective. You see that they were trying to offer structure in a world they didn't fully understand anymore. And you no longer blame yourself for loving too soon. You realize that what you needed wasn't punishment, but perspective. Perspective gives you something rules never could: the ability to discern. It allows you to say, "This relationship doesn't serve who I'm becoming," without needing a lecture. It empowers you to say, "I'm not ready," and mean it. Or to say, "I am ready, and I'll love with both courage and care." You also begin to recognize that maturity isn't about never being hurt. It's about responding to pain with insight, not bitterness. About leaving people better than you found them. About knowing the difference between chemistry and compatibility, intensity and intimacy. That kind of growth doesn't come from avoiding love. It comes from staying awake inside it. Eventually, you find a balance. You stop needing to hide your feelings, but you also stop needing to declare them loudly just to feel seen. You start making choices not from a place of rebellion and not from fear, but from self-respect. And when someone younger than you asks, "Is it okay if I like someone?" you don't say, "Just focus on school." You say, "Tell me more. What makes you feel safe? What makes you feel unsure?" Because now you know what every teenager needs isn't a warning, it's a witness. They need someone who's been there, not with a verdict, but with understanding. And maybe that's the gift we can offer the next generation. Not stricter rules, not looser rules, but deeper presence. Because the truth is, everyone wants the same thing: to love without losing themselves, to grow without being shamed, to be held not in fear, but in faith. And once you've lived both sides, once you've loved too soon, hurt too deeply, grown too quietly, there's a moment where you start looking inward. Not to judge your past, not to rewrite it, but to ask, who was I when I first heard that warning? Who did I become when I defied it? And who am I now, that I can hold both stories and still keep my heart open? Let's sit with that for a moment. Because the answer isn't always in the words we remember. Sometimes it's in how those words changed us. Think back to the first time someone told you, "Don't fall in love yet, just focus on your future." What did that feel like? Maybe you were 12, maybe 16, maybe 20. Maybe it was your mom, your dad, a teacher, or a family friend. Maybe they meant well, but something inside you quietly closed. You started measuring your worth by achievement, not connection. You began to believe that love was a reward for being responsible and not a part of learning how to be human. So you chased the right path. You stayed in line. You checked every box. But late at night, you still wondered, is it okay to want someone beside me even before I figured everything out? Or maybe you did love early. You wrote letters. You held hands. You whispered secrets you thought would last forever. And then it ended. Badly. Quietly. Or without any explanation. And you cried alone, thinking, they were right. I shouldn't have loved. But here's what's deeper than regret. Realizing that love, even when it didn't last, helped you grow into someone you wouldn't trade for anything. So now, ask yourself, what do I still carry from that time? What have I healed? And what kind of love today am I truly ready to receive? These questions don't need answers right away, but they deserve your honesty. Because how you hold your heart now says a lot about how you'll offer it later. And maybe that's the most important truth of all. It's not about when you love. It's about how you choose to show up for yourself and for others no matter what age love finds you. Let's close this reflection with one last step. A reminder of what growing up really means. In a world that often forgets how tender the heart can be, growing up isn't about following every rule. It's about learning which ones still serve you and which ones need to evolve. Don't love too early was never meant to crush your heart. It was a shield passed down from those who once bled quietly, hoping you wouldn't. But a shield, if held too tightly, can become a wall. And walls don't just keep danger out, they keep growth out too. So maybe the real wisdom isn't in banning love from youth. It's in teaching youth how to love with awareness, how to make space for their emotions without letting those emotions define their future, how to care deeply without losing direction, how to fall and rise with grace. If you've ever felt torn between wanting to love and wanting to succeed, you're not alone. And the fact that you're asking the question means you're already growing, because maturity doesn't mean waiting forever. It means knowing yourself enough to choose what aligns with who you are becoming. In the next video, we'll explore the deeper meaning behind another famous quote, one you've probably heard before, maybe even shared. But have you ever stopped to truly understand it? Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this reflection spoke to something inside you, I invite you to leave a commenter. Share this with someone who once loved too early, felt misunderstood, or blamed themselves for simply having a heart. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay honest, stay kind, and keep becoming